Hey everybody! When it comes to talking about Deep Rock Galactic, it's easy to explain how to play or what to do. Explaining what is actually going on inside your head as you play is a bit more difficult. Ironically, we never really think about what we're thinking about. Don't be fooled by appearances. There's a lot going on up there. Even classes like Gunner that might seem simple have a lot of things to consider. There is one class that jumps out as an example of something that requires a lot of thought. One that requires real big brain energy. That class is, of course, Engineer. When you think of an engineer, you probably think of a super genius, someone that makes crazy machines in their spare time and can solve any problem in the blink of an eye. Deep Rock Galactic's engineer fits right into that stereotype, and that is because of his brilliant design. Now, don't misunderstand me, you don't need to be a super genius to play engineer, you just need to do some thinking. Like, a lot of thinking. Most other classes have to think as well, obviously, but Engineer has way more to consider. You need to be good at using your platform, how close or far you need to be from the objective, how much you want to separate from your team, to close them up, or how close... Whoa, take it easy, buddy. It's okay. Shh. It's gonna be okay. It's all gonna be okay. I've spoken to a lot of new players, and they seem to have a lot of difficulty learning how to play Engineer, and it's not that hard to see why. You've got all sorts of different things you need to be thinking about now, and on top of all that, NG's default weapons are kinda... garbage. So in order to help explain this to new players, we need to slow it down and go one step at a time. But where do we even start? How about with what Engineer characters are best known for? Their turrets. As you would expect, turrets are an important part of playing Engineer. What you might not expect, however, is that in Deep Rock Galactic they fall into a much more supportive role. Most games with an Engineer class have the turret being the primary damage dealer. Now, don't get me wrong, turrets in Deep Rock Galactic are very useful, but they're not meant to be your primary damage output. They're just there to help you out. That's what you need to be thinking about when you build your turrets. You need to ask yourself, where is this turret going to be the most helpful? And the answer to that question is almost always on the objective. NG performs best when on or near the objective, so make sure you stick close. It's up to you to make everybody else's lives easier. With your turrets, you can keep an area secure and let your team do their thing. Of course, where exactly the objective is varies from mission type to mission type. It's easy to find on salvage, extraction, or escort duty, but on mining and egg missions you're always going to be moving. It's not exactly like you're going to be defending a single vein of Morkite. That's why it's always important to be looking for good spots to drop your turrets. Even if you've got a clearly defined place to protect, you never know when a bulk detonator is going to show up and ruin your day. You should always have a backup plan. That's why whenever you walk in a room, you should be scanning for good turret spots. But what exactly makes a good turret spot? Ideally, you want to be covering as much ground as possible. Think of your turret's range as a safe spot for you and your friends to go to when things get rough. The more area you cover, the larger your safe spot is. If you want to, you can also purposely cover a smaller area, but increase the amount of damage you're able to do. For example, if you have two turrets facing each other, they cover less total space, but can deal more damage in the space that they do cover. Turrets can really open up a lot of options for you, allowing you to be way more efficient at multitasking. You don't always have to be right next to your team to help protect them, so use this extra mobility to go and collect important resources while your turrets help deal with the swarm. What's really important to keep in mind is that you're rarely ever going to find the perfect spot to put your turrets. That doesn't mean you give up though. You can break terrain that gets in your turret's way, and maybe even enlist the help of the driller to make it easier. Or you could use your platform gun to get a vantage point. Hey, speaking of platforms, let's talk about those. Platforms are incredibly important, being the only tool in the game that can create terrain instead of destroying it. Because of that, engineers carry a heavy burden. It's up to you to help your teammates reach areas that would normally be inaccessible. That can be a lot easier said than done sometimes. Platforms aren't quite that straightforward. Experienced players can forget that it takes time to learn how to use them properly. Honestly, when I play as Engie, I'm so used to it that I throw up a dozen platforms without even thinking about it. But if we want to understand how an Engie thinks, we're going to need a deeper understanding of these instincts. A key instinct you really need to hone is locating resources. Learning to spot these fast can save the rest of the team a lot of time as well as a lot of trouble. Nitra is usually the most important thing to look for, but keep an eye out for stuff like Morkite, secondary objectives, or even gold if you're down on your cash. The next thing you want to think about is mobility. The platform gun is a mobility tool after all. A key part is allowing your team to move around the map easier. Just keep in mind that while platforms are a good tool, you don't need to use them for everything. I see a lot of players who get a bit carried away sometimes. Look buddy, not everybody's going to be in the mood to play your Minecraft parkour map when they're trying to get back to the drop pod. That's not the only way that platforms can help out. If you've got the right upgrade, your platforms can reduce fall damage. This allows you to drop much further than you would normally be able to, and it opens up a lot more options than you might think at first. In this game, you want to move fast, and what's faster than falling? I realize up until now that I've made Engineer sound like a very supportive character, but that's not exactly true. Engineer is great at helping out, of course, but he's also an absolute powerhouse when it comes to combat. What, do you think I'm joking? I promise you that once you get some experience, you'll be getting top kills in almost every single game. Most other Engineer characters are rather helpless without their turrets or their team. That's not quite the case in Deep Rock Galactic. If anything, your teammates might just slow you down. Now, I know you might be thinking, Shadow, didn't you say that Engie's gear is trash? I said that it's trash without upgrades. Once you pick up some upgrades, you'll be squashing bugs left and right. Engie is a master of AoE. Each of your weapons has great potential for area denial, even if it might not seem like it. Now, there's a lot of ground to cover when it comes to talking about weapons. Each weapon has a bunch of different builds, and I don't think you guys want to listen to a 40-hour long video where I go over each and every single build meticulously. So instead, we're just going to focus on what Engie's approach to combat typically looks like. There are two distinct approaches to combat that Engie can take. In order to understand them better, I like to look at them as how you think while fighting. I call these playstyles Think Smart and Think Fast. Let's start with the playstyle that most people are probably imagining when they talk about Engineer. The Think Smart playstyle is built around planning ahead and setting up devious traps. When you enter a new cave, you should be looking for an optimal place to set up and build your arsenal. In order to put up a fight against the Horde, you're going to want to be preparing ahead of time. That seems pretty straightforward, but it's actually really complicated. You need to have a strong understanding of how bugs move and where they're likely to come from. You want to have control over how the bugs are moving. Unfortunately, I can't give a single tip that'll explain how to do this perfectly, especially not with the infinite possibilities that randomly generated terrain brings. That's a skill that comes with experience. Take the time to learn how bugs move on certain types of terrain, and look for places where the terrain will give you a lot of room to work with. Of course, you're not just at the mercy of randomness. You can take control. You've got all sorts of tools that'll help you overcome even the mighty power of RNGesus. Engineer is great at not just killing bugs, but psychologically manipulating them. You can get some pretty insane setups if you use your arsenal effectively. All these tricks and traps can make you feel like a mastermind, but it isn't always sunshine and rainbows. You're gonna have to be micromanaging a lot. This playstyle requires a lot of upkeep, and it's one of the things that can make Engineer tough to approach. Honestly, it can feel like you're a manager at Walmart. Your employees are trying their best, but sometimes they're a little disorganized. Not only that, but you've got to deal with a bunch of inhuman monsters who exist only to ruin your day. Now that we've taken a look at what I would consider to be the stereotypical Engineer playstyle, let's take a look at the Think Fast playstyle. Now, when you hear a name like that, it might be easy to assume that this requires less thought. But that's not quite the case. You see, both playstyles require a lot of thought. While Think Smart requires a lot of planning in advance, this playstyle is about doing the same thing, but faster. Now hold on, this can sound pretty intense, but there's no need to worry. Instead of thinking about all that we've talked about so far at once, it's more about building a mindset. You want to turn yourself into a jack of all trades, with an answer to any problem ready to throw out at a moment's notice. The trick to this playstyle is to always be moving. You can move towards or away from your enemies depending on what the situation requires and how you want to play. That's where the real challenge of this playstyle kicks in. You gotta be able to identify a situation quickly and set up just as fast. A trick to make this easier is to make a mental note of some key areas whenever you have some downtime. You want to look for areas that have a lot of space to work with and great places to set up your turrets. Of course, even with that advice, this playstyle can be risky. If you can't react fast enough, you're not going to last long. With great risk comes great reward, however. I'll put my cards on the table and reveal that this is my favorite way to play Engineer. I tend to prefer playing solo games, so having the freedom to move around more is something I find incredibly valuable. When you're playing multiplayer games, on the other hand, your teammates might not appreciate you going out on your own adventures. Just keep in mind what I said before about sticking near the objective. Long story short, if you like fast-paced action, then you might want to take this playstyle into consideration. I mentioned before how Engineer can be hard to approach, so I hope that this helped convince some new players to give it a shot. And to all you people who thought NG mains are just weird eggheads, maybe you'll feel like grabbing a wrench and trying it out as well. Speaking of shots, let's head down to the bar and grab a round to celebrate. Grab yourself a smart stout and give cheers to our new perspective on our mathematically gifted dwarf buddy. Thank you all very much for watching. If you haven't been able to tell already, this is the first episode of a new series I'm doing called Inside the Dwarven Mind. I'll be taking a look at each of the classes and what they do and what they think about while down in the caves. These videos probably aren't going to be very frequent, they take a lot of time to make, but hopefully I can get the next one out soon. I needed a lot of help making this video, and so I'd like to extend a couple quick thank yous to some people who helped make this video possible. Thank you to the Deep Rock Galactic modding community for helping me to learn how to extract models from the game. And a very, very special thank you to Artahir, who is a 3D modeler who's very fantastic, whose links I'm going to put up on screen and in the description. They textured and rigged the model that I extracted from the game's files, and I would not have been able to do this without them, so thank you very much for that. I'd also like to say a quick thanks to all my friends who helped by acting in this, and who helped play with me, and who helped go over my script to check it over, help me edit it, help me improve it. Especially thanks to Xylation, who's appeared on this channel a couple times before. He put in tons of work to help me with this, and I would not have been able to do it without him. What did you think? Did you enjoy? Are you excited to see the videos about the other classes? Leave a like and a comment to let me know, and I'll see you all next time.